welcome back to GTD. Just got done with a great race at Phoenix. The option tire was being used for the first time this season, and it delivered. There was good racing, but most importantly, Christopher Bell back-to-back three-peat, the
Three
first
in a
one we've
row.
seen since Kyle Larson in 2021, and also our first correct GTD pick of the season, as I picked Bell to three-peat, and he did. So that was pretty cool. But Keegan, what are your initial thoughts as we finish up at Phoenix?
My initial thought when the checkered flag wave was, wow, still got 3 in a row. And then right after that was, and Micah got a win. I think last year the third race of the season was Las Vegas, and that was the first race we had a winner picked. Or no, this is the fourth race of the season. But I think last year was the third or fourth, and it was Vegas, and that was our first pick win. So we're still get the wins pretty early in the season. That's always good for us and our integrity. But yeah, Bell back to back. Incredible. Had a good car. I think there are some other cars that were contending that we'll talk about later that maybe, got a little unlucky here and there. And we'll talk about one big decision that I want to get your thoughts on a little bit later. But yeah, Bell, just an incredible drive from him, incredible burnout. He's got to be on Cloud 9 right now. And your pick and probably everyone in NASCAR community's pick right now for the championship is looking really hot.
Yeah, the championship prediction for Bell is off to an absolute heater of a start. I've been super happy with it. But let's get into the tire strategy we saw here at Phoenix. There was a lot of teams that saved their two-option tires for that third and final stage. You saw some guys have a go at it earlier. Ryan Preece was really the big guy that just kind of threw them out randomly. He was able to drive through the field pretty much every time. But were you happy with how the option tire worked? Do you think that maybe you'd like to see the option tire become the regular tire for the fall race in Phoenix? Overall, how do you think it played out?
I don't think it needs to be the regular tire because then you're kind of you have more tire wear, and that's always good for strategy, but then you're kind of still stuck where you are now with the primary tire and just the aero tight and the blocking. So I think having the two options, a lot like F1 does, and this is, in my opinion, a marginally different than F1 compared to their soft and mediums or medium and hards. You saw, just the time difference and the way they can just drive any line they want. Even if they weren't good up high, they could just go around a car. You saw Ryan Preece go around Larson and Byron a time or two late in the race when he got his second pair on, and just the time difference overall is just incredible. And I think it's working. We worked great at Richmond. I'm so glad they implemented it here at Phoenix, and I think it's working perfectly here. I think two is a really good number for a race.
Yeah, I think that the two sets worked really well as well, although I think I would disagree with you. I'd like to see the option tire become just the regular tire for the Phoenix race in the fall. I don't think having an option and a prime tire for your championship race, I know NASCAR really doesn't care about how gimmicky the sport gets sometimes, but
I don't think about this being the venue.
Yeah, I think it's a bit too far. I think you need to keep just one tire, and I'd rather have the tire that wears more, makes guys have to make decisions. You saw Joey Logano when he went out there and tried to win stage 2, really had to manage the option tires there. So I'd like to see it be your main one in the fall. And let's kind of get into some of the key players now, because we saw Christopher Bell, like you mentioned, he dominated this race mostly, but there were some other guys that led laps. Joey Logano mainly did it on the alternate strategy, Austin Cindric for a little bit. William Byron, I think all day had the closest car to Christopher Bell, and then towards the end of the race, pitted, caution came out while he was in the pits, got sent to the back. But I still don't think Byron had much for Bell on the long run. Bell looked to be far and away the best car as you got maybe 20, 30 laps on these tires, but on the short run, William Byron, Tyler Reddick at the start of the race before his power steering gave out, could kind of keep up with him. And then I think the second best car in the long runs was Ryan Blaney until his motor pieced out and went by in one big boom, as they say. But coming up to the end of this race, do you think that with the way the end of the race played out, maybe a William Byron could have taken it to Christopher Bell if he was up there and wasn't still trying to work his way back through?
I think there's two guys who could have taken Christopher Bell. I think one of those guys is Joey Logano, who you saw had to use his first option tire really early just to get back from that penalty. We saw him and Byron kind of controlling the whole race and going back and forth a little bit in the beginning. So I think either one of those guys could have gone to him. Now Logano, it's just a victim of getting that penalty, putting himself, and we'll talk about that penalty in a second, but putting himself in that position to where he was just in the back, having to overdrive his car all day. But I think he had a really good shot. Him and Byron both. I think Bell still would have been up there and very possibly would have won just because of that long run speed. But I would have curious to see what Logano would have done. And I was also very curious to see if he would have gone, and they talked about this in the booth, to his 20 lap used option tire at the end. I was very curious to see if he was going to do that. He didn't. However, Ross Chastain did. And I was like, okay, maybe this will work. It did not work. Once those tires cooled off, and Yeah, once those tires cooled off and he got put back on the track with those tires, I mean, you saw it on the restart. He almost caused a wreck just because how slow he took off. So do not go back to use red tires.
Yeah, we clearly saw that didn't work at all. And I agree with you. I think Logano or Byron maybe could have given a Bell a run for his money. But one guy we haven't talked about that was there at the end was Denny Hamlin, just steadily improved throughout the day. At the end of the day, almost got their second closest finish in NASCAR Cup Series Phoenix history. And just Denny Hamlin, it feels like so close all the time at these short tracks recently. Hasn't been able to break through in a while. And Toyota as a whole also. Toyota usually dominates the spring race at Phoenix. And then we see in the fall, it's Penske, it's the Ford. Sometimes it's Chevrolet with either Kyle Larson. We've seen Chase Elliott in the past. How do you think Toyota takes what they did today and can transfer it to the fall this year?
I think you mentioned that they maybe were a little bit more behind what they typically are at this spring race in Phoenix compared to especially Penske, who is kind of almost abysmal at these spring races. And then by the time the championship rolls around, they've got it figured out. I think because of what they've seen from other teams, kind of the difference between spring and fall, and with this track specifically being the championship track, I think they tried a lot of different things. I think that's why Hamlin's car kind of came on a little late. I think that's why Bell had a really good long run car. I think they were trying different things because typically the Phoenix races aren't super caution heavy. We had a number of cautions today, but they're typically you have a lot of green flag runs. So I think they're really trying to kind of get some data into some long green flag runs, especially with this option tire, and kind of see how that affects other players and the car itself and the tires and the racing and the wear. So I think they're trying new things, and that's why I think Hamlin and Bell are both good in their own kind of aspects.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if Toyota can finally use that data and actually implement it in the fall in Phoenix because they've struggled to do that in years past. But let's run through the rest of the top 10 here. We had Kyle Larson coming home third and was probably the second best Hendrick car of the day. We talked about William Byron, who came home sixth after his unfortunately timed pit stop. But I'll tell you who really stands out to me in this top 10 is Josh Berry finishing fourth. And he was there on pace all day. That car was fast.
He's been fast all season. I mean, Kevin Harvick kept mentioning it because I mean, you can't not. I mean, that 21 car, it's like the 80s, the 70s and 80s. Like we've seen that car up front a lot this year, and I'm very okay with that. I don't know. I want to say it's Josh Berry. I really want to say that he's the guy putting that car where it is, but I don't know if it's Josh Berry or if Wood Brothers is getting really good equipment. But either way, it's still Josh Berry. And he's doing an incredible job behind the wheel right now, and I'm very, very okay with that.
Yeah, he's been great. And for me, it kind of is very harsh on Harrison Burton is Josh Berry's performance because you've seen what Matt DiBenedetto could do in this 21 car when he was there, some top fives. And Harrison Burton, other than the one big win at Daytona, really didn't do anything in this car. And now you have Josh Berry bringing it right back into the top 10. I think that's a pretty harsh review of Harrison Burton's time in Cup. Then as you keep going down the top 10, Chris Buescher, the best finish of any RFK car and extends his streak of top 10s at Phoenix. Still very underrated guy. Your pick to win today. And for a second, I thought he might get it there at the end, starting inside row 2, but not quite able to make a move. And then one guy who I think had a very underrated day was Alex Bowman, who came home 7th after starting, I believe, either 32nd or 34th. Started way down the field and slowly,
the worst of the Hendrick
through
cars.
tire strategy, made his way through the field and ended up being probably, you could argue, the second fastest Hendrick car at the end there, although I would still probably say the third, but very solid day for the Allied best friends car there with the puppies on it.
Very cool looking paint scheme. But yeah, a good day for him. You had Chase Elliott had another top 10, kind of extending his top 10, a top 10 dominance, I guess. Even going back to last year, just always in the top 10.
And that was not a top 10 car.
No, that car very good in practice, struggled in the race. Very curious to see kind of what goes on there and just how they come back to the next short track that's coming up in a few weeks. But I think it's time to talk about Joey Logano because that was the first big thing that happened in the day.
Yeah.
What was that? Do you know what NASCAR's official textbook black and white ruling is? Is it any of the car? Is it a tire?
Yeah.
It's obviously not the whole car.
It is any of the car. If any of the car from the leader goes below that yellow line, it is counted as a restart violation if you do it before the start-finish line. And I think that's a little ridiculous. I mean, you look at how road course track limits work, how the double yellow line works at Daytona and Talladega. It's the whole car. So I don't get why at Phoenix it's suddenly, if the right corner of your splitter clips the yellow line, you're going to the back. That seems a bit excessive in my opinion, and a bit of a tough break for Joey there.
He was angry, rightfully so. I mean, he had an argument. He did break the rule that they had set, but I mean, very very close. And I mean, that's just one of those racing incidents that you can't get mad at Joey Logano for doing because, I mean, you saw last week. Oh, we're not calling track limits in turn 6. You can do whatever
Exactly,
you
yeah.
want in turn 6, and now it's like, ooh, I think he breathed a little too far on that line, so we're gonna yank him out for that. But I mean, then again, it led to some great storylines and strategies because it forced him to use the tire early, much like you saw Ryan Preece do in a few other cars. But another guy, Ty Dillon, when it comes to the option tire,
Yeah.
was very solid, very very good strategy from that team, the number 10 team, but too fast entering ruined his
Yeah.
day.
I think without that speeding penalty, he probably finishes in the back half of the top 10 somewhere, which is absolutely a day to write home about for that car. And speaking of
100%.
days to write home about, how about your dark horse for this week, Zane Smith, coming home in ninth?
Yeah, that's two
Very,
top
very
tens in
good
a row for me.
performance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
doing
Noah
very
Gragson
well.
last week and Zane Smith. So we'll see what happens in our Las Vegas preview. But yeah, Zane Smith, that was a good dark horse pick for me, I think.
Yeah, and then the final top 10 finisher we have not talked about was Kyle Busch coming home in eighth. Just solid speed again from RCR. Austin Dillon finished 12th in this race. 2 top 12 finishes for RCR at Phoenix. You remember last year at Phoenix, those cars were both wrecking loose or wrecking tight. They had no speed at all, running 30th. So RCR looks to have found something at the start of this year for sure.
I was about to say. I mean, we just talked about Ty Dillon running in top 5 for a little bit. Kyle Busch has been up at every race at the front this year. Austin Dillon's been not right behind Kyle Busch, but in some of the races he has. Atlanta, he was up in the front for a little bit. He just kind of moseyed his way on, and he's kind of just making like, hey, RCR is here this year, and I think RCR is going to get a couple wins this year. I do think they're all going to come from Kyle Busch, but hey, wins are wins for a team. And then real quick before we go on to something else, the cars. I've noticed every super warm race we've gone to, these next gen cars have had issues. Whether it's, I mean, power
Yeah.
steering, we've had issues everywhere. So put power steering aside. Brake issues have been really bad at, especially Phoenix. Homestead, we've had some brake issues. We've had engine issues at Homestead and Phoenix. Las Vegas, we've had some failures. There's been a lot of issues at warm tracks that I've noticed. I'm not in the garage. I'm not looking at these parts. I'm not a scientist. Just something I've noticed. These cars are kind of weak
Yeah.
in the desert.
Well, we know NASCAR teams run things so close to the limit. I would assume they're doing that as well here, and maybe the brakes just can't handle the hot environments as much. So you try to run to the edge. And to your point, there have only been a couple issues, though. They have been at these hot environments. Most of the teams have been fine. I think it's kind of that attitude of, well, it won't be us. And then if you're Bubba Wallace, it was you today. So just kind of
It's like
trying to
getting right
work it
after
out
him.
with these parts sometimes. Yeah, multiple guys. And then a couple more things as we wrap up here. Wanted to touch on Ty Gibbs again. Just this guy cannot catch a break, cannot get a good run to save his life. Finishes 25th. That's now even more finishes of 25th or worse. I believe, except for the Daytona 500, he's finished 25th or worse in
The
his
16th.
last 9 races.
Yeah, 16th is his highest finish in his last 9 or 10 races, I believe, and it was the 500. So I mean, yeah, not. I mean, today I'm not gonna say it was his fault. With the brake failure, it was a mechanical issue. You can't control that as a driver. But some of them, not all of them, have been mechanical issues. We can say. I mean, there's been some where he's just kind of, you've seen Gibbs at the front. He's just kind of hanging back in the rear.
Yeah.
So I really need to see. I mean, I don't want him to turn into Austin Dillon Jr. or another Ty Dillon or a guy who's just he already has that repertoire as, oh, he's there because his last name's Gibbs. He really doesn't need to keep performing like this, or that kind of talk about him is going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, it needs to be turned around for sure. And then finally, last little bit here before we wrap things up, I think that we need to talk about Spire Motorsports. They had the huge qualifying
I
day,
want to talk
all
about
3 cars in the top 10, and then in the huge wreck with Briscoe and Haley. Haley and Hocevar both end up getting taken out. Haley finishes 34th, Hocevar 36th, both out of the race. And then Michael McDowell had his own problems, a couple big brake lockups. Car did not appear to be handling well all day, got caught up in a couple wrecks, ended up 27th. And if you're Spire, you have to look at that as what could have been.
Well, what could have been is they got a point. I got the fastest lap point. If I think that was with,
Ooh.
I think that was right before the green white checkered. So unless someone took out the green white checkered, which Byron might have, I think he got the fastest lap point. So yay, I guess.
Let's see. It looks like Christopher Bell ended up with the fastest lap, or was that
I
his fastest lap of the race? I can't. Doesn't make it super clear on here. I don't know.
but there's a chance Michael McDowell got it. I know he had it going in green white
Yeah,
checkered.
I
So unless
believe
someone took
Christopher
it from
Bell
him.
ended up with the fastest lap of the race at a 28:11, if
Ah,
I'm reading this correctly. So
interesting. Very good. So yeah, I mean, he won the
yes,
race. That makes sense.
yeah,
But yeah, I think that's all we have for Phoenix. Make sure you turn in to Las Vegas preview, another desert. They're just kind of going across the state real quick. Going to Las Vegas, going to hang out in Vegas for a week. They'll have a little bit of fun before they get to racing Sunday. But Las Vegas has been very good last few years, much like all the other intermediates. And we have a good string of intermediates coming up. So a lot of good racing to look forward to. Some storylines that we're going to highlight in our preview show that you should look out for this weekend. So make sure you tune into that. And F1 starting this week. Isn't that right?
yes. Very much looking forward to it. We're gonna have F1 episodes later this week as well. But like you said, Las Vegas preview will be out later this week as we continue the West Coast swing. RIP Auto Club Speedway. We will see you guys next time.